What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TTB Ravens Media, bringing you Ravens content every single day. If you want to see that daily Ravens content, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below and hit the notification bell as well if you want to get notified every single time I upload a brand new video. Now, obviously, it's the offseason. We're waiting for training camp to start, starting pretty soon. Then we get into the preseason, so obviously content is going to ramp up and topics are going to be more prevalent. But there is actually some Ravens news to discuss because Lamar Jackson has recently been seen working out in the offseason, which makes sense. It's what everyone does. But all these different quarterbacks, they typically have just different wide receivers that they like to work out with. Tom Brady in the offseason a lot of times works out with Gronk. Baker Mayfield, I believe, is working out with like Cole Beasley. Lamar Jackson is working out with Willie Snead, former receiver of his, and Robby Anderson. Now, if you don't know, Robby Anderson is wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, and there have been some quotes about him, maybe being unhappy about the trade for Baker Mayfield over to the Carolina Panthers. Now, he was obviously the wide receiver with Sam Darnold back in New York before he ended up going over, actually before both of them went over to the New York Jets. And so let's talk about the potential for Robby Anderson to come over to the Baltimore Ravens because he does kind of fit what the Ravens need. The Ravens do, I think, need that pure deep threat, which is all Robby Anderson is. All right, that is Robby Anderson. If you want a deep threat in the NFL, it's Robby Anderson. All right? I mean, that's really what he brings. Okay? So in Carolina, he's been disappointing. And that's partially because the quarterback play has not been great. Sam Darnold ended up even getting hurt last year. So he was dealing with like Teddy Bridgewater and then, just poor quarterback play last year. And they really didn't have a running game because Christian McCaffrey got hurt. So, it hasn't been the best situation for him. He has not been the guy that they were hoping to get, coming out of New York. Because with the Jets, he had 5 touchdowns in 3 consecutive years. He's yet to have... Then he came in 2020 and had 3 touchdowns and 1,000 yards, which very solid. And then the next year with Sam Darnold, only 500 yards and only 5 touchdowns. He was not the player that they were hoping him to be. So, could the Ravens make the trade for Robby Anderson, and should they? First off, I'm going to say that they shouldn't, but I'm going to talk about the likelihood that they make a trade. The biggest thing that you have to look at is the contract. Robby Anderson's cap hit is about $10 million, almost $11 million this season. There is a potential out next year, but it would create about $9 million in dead cap, and his cap space or cap hit would be about $21 million. So that already is a lot of money. So if the Ravens are going to make that move, they would have to do something similar to what the Cleveland Browns and Carolina Panthers did in the Baker Mayfield trade, where the Panthers would have to pay Robby Anderson's salary, or at least a good chunk of it, because the Ravens don't have that cap space. But they do have draft capital. They could end up trading some guys over there, right? The possibility is there. If the Ravens really wanted to make the trade, they could get it done. Okay? They could probably, I think if they sent a 3rd round pick, it would get it done. That's kind of my expectation. Panthers take half the cap space. Ravens send over a 3rd. And then maybe the Ravens send over a player that may not make the roster or something like that as a wide receiver. But honestly, I think a third round pick will get it done. Now, whether or not the Ravens should, I don't think so. I don't think that Robby Anderson... while I'm a big fan of Robby Anderson. The first game I ever saw Robby Anderson play was when he was with the New York Jets, and he was actually playing with Bryce Petty at quarterback. And Robby Anderson, I swear, this dude was open every single play, and Bryce Petty was targeting him every single play, but Bryce Petty was missing every single throw. It was very frustrating because, I had no stake in the game, but I was watching it, I'm like, this dude is open every play. He's burning this corner. I don't remember who the corner was that was guarding him, but he was cooking him, and Bryce Petty was just throwing it out of bounds on the sideline every time, and it was so frustrating. Like, he could have had 250 yards and 5 touchdowns in that game if Bryce Petty hadn't been like the worst quarterback ever when throwing to him. But overall, he does bring that element. He's got good size. At 6'3", he's got great speed. He's a track type of athlete, but he's a very one-dimensional player. Okay? And while I do think the Ravens need a deep threat, they don't need a deep threat that can't do anything else. And Robby Anderson is just a deep threat. Okay? And when you're looking at this Ravens roster, paying the amount of money, because even if they had to pay half, $5 million, which is still kind of a lot for the Ravens, they do not have a lot of money. $5 million for a guy that does one thing, and Greg Roman probably wouldn't even use that one thing, it's just not worthwhile in my opinion, okay? Because if the Ravens wanted to go after deep threats, there are guys that they could get on the free agent market that can do it. And I think also the Ravens, they want to test out their guys. I don't think Devin Duvernay, is the deep threat that a lot of people are hoping he can be. I still see him as a slot wide receiver, but he's fast. He can get behind the defense. I'm not saying he can't run deep routes. He can. Rashad Bateman can run deep routes, but in terms of that super speedster like Hollywood Brown has been, where Hollywood, he was the guy that Lamar would hit deep. The Ravens don't really have that anymore. Maybe a guy can develop into it. But overall, if the Ravens were to go out and sign a player like a John Ross or a Will Fuller, that would be better in my opinion. Because they would get them for cheaper. Significantly cheaper. They wouldn't have to give up draft capital. And they wouldn't be demanding roster space or snaps or playing time. Because they wouldn't be expected to put up 1,000 yards. Because Robby Anderson expects himself to put up 1,000 yards. I mean, that's his expectation. He sees himself as a very good wide receiver. And he gets paid a lot of money. A lot of money. And to pay a guy that much money and only have him do one thing isn't what the Ravens need. Especially when the Ravens don't have a high volume passing attack. If Greg Roman wasn't here, I could see the value in it. If the Ravens ran, a Chiefs style Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, get the ball deep, stretch the field type of offense, I think they would need a player like Robby Anderson. But they don't. They run the ball, and they have some deep passing plays, but they're a lot of times pretty bad. And that's not going to get Robby Anderson to be successful in Baltimore. So while I do really like Robby Anderson as a player, I don't feel like it's a good move for the Ravens to try and trade for him. And I've seen a lot of people saying the Ravens should trade for him, which is why I'm making this video. He was seen working out with Lamar Jackson. He seems like he may be unhappy in Carolina. So it's just kind of rough. But let me know what you guys think. Should the Ravens try and bring in Robby Anderson? If so, how much should they spend on him? What's the trade value? What's the trade looking like? Let me know. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Subscribe for daily Ravens content, and I will see all of you again tomorrow.